Hello, and welcome to another episode of Big Questions. This is part 2 of Do Black Lives Matter? Last time we talked about how Black Lives, when the statement Black Lives Matter is taken literally that Black Lives do matter. But now we will be taking a more specific view at the organization Black Lives Matter and the general social movement accompanied by it. Okay, so this analysis will be revolving around what they say about themselves, and that is what I will be examining here. So I will be looking at their own website in just a moment. Okay, here we are at, oops, my voice cracked, blacklivesmatter.com/about. The area that I am looking at is delineated by a red box, which I added, and I would just like to add that this is all in fair use and falls under fair use as I am discussing this in the context of education as well as the social effects of this. In other words, this is fair use. I'm not too experienced with doing this, but I will see if this works. If it does not work, the video will get taken down and will be replaced by something that does not show all these things. But anyway, here we see it is about the Black Lives Matter network. Okay, fair enough. Black Lives Matter is a chapter-based national organization, which means they are organized, interesting to know, working for the validity of Black life, which is a good thing. Black life should have value. Black Lives Matter, yes. Okay. We are working to rebuild or build, I don't know why that's in parentheses, but I suppose I'll find out later, the Black liberation movement. This implies that blacks are not free and are in need of liberation. Okay, and now they say this is not a moment but a movement. Okay, interesting. Number symbol Black Lives Matter was created in 2012 after Trayvon Martin's murderer, George Zimmerman, was acquitted for his crime, and dead 17-year-old Trayvon was posthumously placed on trial for his own murderer. Okay, now I have seen this in the news coverage, and from what I can see, it is in fact very clear that although George Zimmerman did certainly act outside of the bounds that he should have acted, that he was in fact defending himself after after Trayvon Martin attempted to, I suppose, physically subdue him in some manner, and that at that point there became a fight after George Zimmerman had confronted Trayvon Martin. Now, Trayvon Martin is famous for having carried some Skittles, as well as, I believe it was, watermelon flavor Arizona tea or something along those lines, and it is known that those two ingredients are involved in the making of a sort of soft drug. So I'm not saying that Trayvon Martin was in fact making drugs. However, it is possible. But back onto the case, George Zimmerman was acting outside of his bounds, but I do not believe that he was the physical aggressor in the confrontation. And also, he did end up getting injured from it to some degree. So from the total evidence that I've seen, I believe that George Zimmerman did not actually murder Trayvon Martin in an offensive sense, that he went out and he saw a black man and decided that he would shoot him, but rather that he saw someone who he believed might be involved in some criminal activity, so he profiled him. I don't know whether he profiled him racially or just because he looked suspicious to him. That is something that cannot be determined. However, he should not have confronted Trayvon Martin, because Trayvon Martin apparently retaliated physically, and it escalated to the point where George Zimmerman, believing that he was in danger, chose to shoot Trayvon Martin. But anyway, they call him a murderer here, and it says that he was acquitted. So this implies that injustice was done, which is something that is very prominent in this movement, that there has been done injustice against blacks. Another thing to note is that, in fact, the U.S. Department of Justice was sponsoring to send people over to the site of the trial to protest. So it was, in fact, the government itself was taking sides in the issue, which I believe it should not have. And from that alone, I think there could have been a mistrial because of that. But no mistrial was declared, and George Zimmerman was, in fact, acquitted as for the legal process that was accomplished, because from what can be ascertained from the physical evidence, George Zimmerman was not found guilty. And this is an important part in the U.S. legal system, where someone is innocent until proven guilty. And this has prevented people from being falsely imprisoned and taken on false charges. And I'd rather have it so that a few criminals get to walk rather than have a lot of innocent people put in prison. I think that is much preferable and is, in fact, better for individual liberty. Okay, so moving on that, I'm seriously criticizing the Black Lives Matter movement now, because they are pulling up something that I personally disagree with. I disagree with their judgment on the death of Trayvon Martin. Okay, so moving on, it goes further to say, he was posthumously placed on trial for his own murder. I'm pretty sure that there was no trial for Trayvon Martin. I think this is an overly dramatic, let me think of a correct phrase here, not extrapolation. But anyway, the point is, I think they're over-dramatizing how it actually happened, how the trial happened, saying that he was put in trial for his own murder, which, honestly, in a legal sense, I do not believe that happened at any point in the trial, and that was, in fact, just an investigation as to the events that happened, because it's important to know what actually happened. Of course, I'm not saying that George Zimmerman is some sort of saint, because, as I said earlier, he went in when he shouldn't have, and later on he was involved in some sort of domestic abuse case, and that I'm not saying that he was a good guy. I'm just saying that I think that Trayvon Martin wasn't entirely innocent either in the events that occurred that night. It takes two to tango. That's what I'm saying. Okay. Rooted in the experiences of the black people in this country who actively resist our dehumanization. This says that blacks are being dehumanized. So I would say who is dehumanized blacks, but of course this doesn't directly go into that at the moment. But I'm not sure exactly. I think that this dehumanization can, in general, be caused by a sort of collectivism that does not look at people by their individual merits, but puts them into boxes, such as saying, well, these are blacks, they should have these values, they should act this way, or these are whites, they should have these values or should act this way. This collectivism can cause a sort of dehumanization of the individual. Okay, now it says number symbol, Black Lives Matter, is a call to action and a response to the virulent anti-black racism that permeates our society. I honestly disagree that this exists. I do not believe that the society in general is having this sort of racism. I mean, personally, I've never met anyone that is seriously racist against blacks in a serious tone. I mean, I've met some people that aren't too comfortable with blacks. That is true, but I've never met anyone that is actively racist against blacks. But of course, my own experiences don't mean anything, because looking logically at this is not an argument that people aren't racist against blacks, because I know that there certainly are people that are racist against blacks. Even though I haven't seen them in my own community. However, I still believe from what I've seen about statistics and numbers that this is an exaggeration of the events and of the number of people that are being racist. Of course, they're not giving a number, because if they said, 20% of the country is racist against blacks, they'd have to back it up. And I don't think you could say that even 20% is seriously anti-black in the American society. Anyway, it continues, Black Lives Matter is a unique contribution that goes beyond extrajudicial killings of black people by police and vigilantes. Now, I'm going to bring up something that is a fact here, that in fact, more blacks are killed by other blacks in a murder setting, that is, and in fact, more blacks die from abortion than by murder and many others, and heart attacks and AIDS combined. So I think if you're really going to who is more racist against blacks, I'd have to say the pro-abortion movement, simply because the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, was known to have attended some KKK meetings, the Ku Klux Klan, which is an anti-black organization. And a lot of these abortion clinics are set up in black communities, so it could be said that blacks are targeted for a sort of eugenic, a non-aggressive eugenics movement, a passive eugenics of come here and we'll kill your fetus so that it does not get born, so that there are less black people overall. And I do believe that abortion is a major player in this, and it surprises me that the Black Lives Matter movement has not mentioned this, because this has in fact killed more black people than have died in the Vietnam War. In many times over, in fact. So that is something. And I'll read on further, just a moment. Okay, it continues saying, it goes beyond the narrow nationalism that can be prevalent within black communities, which merely call on black people to love black, live black, and bi black, keeping straight cis black men in the front of the movement, while our sisters, queer and trans and disabled folk, take up roles in the background or not at all. Okay, let's analyze this. It goes beyond the narrow nationalism, and here they that can be prevalent within black communities, and then it says what this nationalism does, which merely call on black people to love black, live black, and buy black, keeping straight cis white men, okay, straight cis black men, sorry. So I find this interesting because they say it's nationalism, which means that they want to have a nation, or that they want to have a sort of a country. Nationalism generally is what that means. But since this is race-based, then it means that it's race-based nationalism, which I think is a sort of racism, to be honest. But it says that can be prevalent within black communities, okay? And I have seen that there is a sort of self-imposed segregation among some black communities, in which there are visible black communities in the sense that blacks choose to live in groups with other blacks and choose to culturally separate themselves from the rest of citizens in the United States. And this does occur, and I think that there's nothing wrong with wanting to live with people who are similar to you. However, this can cause propagation of bad ideas, in the sense that it does not cause for unity in the country. It in fact causes for division in the country when this occurs. But it says, which merely call on black people to love black, live black, and buy black, saying that, and then it says goes beyond at the start of the paragraph, which means this is not far enough. It is not enough for black people to love black, live black, and buy black. That is not enough, is what they're saying, basically, when they're saying that it goes beyond. It says, keeping straight cis black men in the front of the movement, while our sisters, queer and trans and disabled folk, take up roles in the background or not at all. So cis, or more accurately quis, means this in Latin, and saying that black men who are born as black men and who are recognized as black men and who see themselves as black men. So basically a regular black man, They're saying that there is an overemphasis on just the black men, and that it neglects apparently black women and black transgender and queer and disabled. I don't know why they put disabled in there, because that goes against the parallelism this had, but because let's be honest, there is a sort of false dichotomy here when you're saying black men, sisters, queer, trans, and then disabled folk, because any of the other categories can fall under disabled. A black trans man can be disabled, a black trans woman can be disabled, a black man can be disabled, a black woman can be disabled, a black queer can be disabled. So I find that interesting, but there's nothing wrong with putting that in there, just an extra category to say that, yes, we are looking at all the genders, but we also have a focus on the disabled as well. I think that's good to have when you're having a movement. Take up roles in the background or not at all. So they're saying that, as I said earlier, that there is too much focus on the black man. Okay, then it says, Black Lives Matter affirm the lives of black, queer, and trans folks, disabled folks, black undocumented folks, folks with no records, women, and all black lives among the gender spectrum. It centers those that have been marginalized within black liberation movements. It is a tactic to rebuild the black liberation movement. Okay? So, first sentence, Black Lives Matter affirms the lives of black, queer, and trans folks and disabled folks, black undocumented folks, folks with no records, women, and all black lives along the gender spectrum. What I'm wondering here is black undocumented folks and folks with records. Okay, not with no records. I mispronounced that earlier because I was reading quickly. So they're saying that it affirms the lives of these. I'm not sure what it means by affirms the lives. I suppose it could mean that it gives affirmation to them in the sense that it says that, well, okay, Black Lives Matter. Let's go back to that phrase, that these lives matter, or not only that these lives are exist and that these lives are valued in the sense that they are life, but also that these lives are approved. I believe that's what it's saying, that it approves blacks being queer and trans and does not discriminate against blacks who have documentation and those who have not, and the disabled as well. That is important, as well as women and all black lives along the gender spectrum. So it is saying that their ideology is not based upon a heteronormative spectrum, which gives me information on how they look at society and culture. It centers those that have been marginalized within the black liberation movements. It is a tactic to rebuild the black liberation movement, which I think that is a sort of contradiction in terms, because it says that there have been those who are marginalized within black liberation movements, indicating that there are black liberation movements. Then it says that they want to build or rebuild the black liberation movement. But the fact that they put the re in parentheses is questionable to me, because I'm not really sure whether they're saying that there are black liberation movements that need to be rebuilt, or that there is a black liberation movement that needs to be built in the first place. It makes me confused as to whether they're confused on whether the black liberation movement exists or does not exist. But that's just my opinion. Okay, let's continue to the next segment. Okay, now we are at the next segment. What does $ Black Lives Matter mean? Now, I think you're probably annoyed by this by now. I just don't like calling it hashtag. Call it $, call it £. Just please don't call it hashtag. That annoys me. So, as I annoyed you, you annoy me. Okay, back here, it says, when we say Black Lives Matter, we are broadcasting the conversation around state violence to include all the ways in which black people are intentionally left powerless at the hands of the state, which means the government. We are talking about the ways in which black lives are deprived of our basic human rights and dignity. Okay? So I suppose these are the examples of how they are deprived of their basic human rights and dignities. Okay, how black poverty and genocide is state violence. Okay, that's interesting. I'm not sure how exactly that is true. Black genocide, with the abortion clinics thing, yes, there might be a voluntary genocide of some black people. Black poverty, however, I can see how some political parties, I'm not naming names, would benefit from black poverty, in the sense that they would use that as a way to gain voters. But I'm not. I the government itself does not do this. It is private organizations that can negatively affect this. However, I'm not sure that the government itself does this, since the fact that the segregation has legally been stopped, that it is legally illegal to discriminate against people via race. Because of this, I'm saying that it is not state sponsored. That if anybody is encouraging blacks to be poor, or causing them to be poor, or there is some sort of genocide against blacks, it is all individual organizations. Of course, you could say that since Planned Parenthood is funded by the government, the genocide is state violence. On second thought, I take that back. But so that one, partially true, I'd say. How 2.8 million black people are locked in cages in this country is state violence. So I'm sure they're talking about prisons, and I can tell you, yes, there is a disproportionate amount of blacks who are in prisons in the United States. They say cages, but this, I think, puts down the fact that there are also people of other ethnicities in these so-called cages, in other words, prison cells. And most of these people, I'd say almost all of them, are in there because they have committed a crime of some sort. This is not racism, this is justice. And saying that this is a sort of violence says that I'm saying I would rather have criminals who have committed crimes worthy of prison be in prison than being out and being allowed to do things that they would do. Because let's be honest, if you commit a crime, that it massively increases your chance of, or at least your potential for committing another crime. I mean, you've done it once, you can do it again. I'm not saying that people who have committed a crime once will do a crime again. That is not true, necessarily. However, it is something to look at, that that is why people are sent to prison. It's because they want the government and society at large wants to stop people from committing further crimes, and they have to, in order to accomplish this, either eliminate them or restrict their access to society, and that is what prisons do. Okay? And it is also true that a lot of these murders that are committed on blacks are also committed by blacks. And I think it has to do with the culture of a sort of self-imposed segregation that occurs in a lot of black communities, which leads to an us against them mentality. And when it's this mentality, it causes people to it causes a spiral of crime, in the sense that policemen are afraid of being called racists for arresting black men, which is something that has happened recently, that crimes have increased since the Ferguson, Missouri event, because policemen, especially white policemen, are afraid of being called racists by arresting blacks, which means that when they are more lenient on crime, and because of this, crime has doubled in some cities even, which means that in fact more blacks are being murdered because this because policemen are afraid of being called racist. So it is in fact it. I think Black Lives Matter, not exclusively, but Black Lives Matter and similar movements have played a part in doing this, which has reduced the general security of the average American citizen, and in fact, the security of the average black life. Then it says, how black women bearing the burden of a relentless assault on our children and our families is state violence. I agree. Well, when you talk about children and state violence and state funding of Planned Parenthood, I can see how that could tie in there. However, an assault on black families, it brings to mind the statistics of how high there is a high degree of black children who do not have a father in their individual lives, which is sad to me. And I still think it's from, as I said earlier, there is a culture that causes this this violence, and it also has to do with the fact that we are still suffering today from the consequences of bringing slaves over the ocean. Of course, in Africa, they had slaves long before they had blacks being enslaved by blacks, and it was just a new chapter in blacks being sold first to Arabs and then later to European colonists. And that is a sad thing, and I hope that never happens again. However, people shouldn't have a chip on their shoulder because of this, in the sense that the people that did this, most, if not all of them, are dead. And you shouldn't be blaming an entire race of people for this, because it all over the world, North American native cultures, South American native cultures, Eurasia, Africa, there has been slavery. And I can tell you this, from ancient times, whites have enslaved whites, and blacks have enslaved blacks, and Asians have enslaved Asians, and the Aboriginals of North and South America have enslaved each other as well. And so, in essence, you can't really blame any specific ethnicity for slavery, because all ethnicities have been involved in it. And also, you shouldn't really blame people who themselves are not involved in this, in the sense that, of course, you could say a soldier in a war chose to follow orders and murder civilians. That soldier has blame because the soldier did something himself that is ethically wrong, and you could say that there is a slight blame on those that were just bystanders who did nothing to stop this. But when you look at today and slavery in the United States, the people that are alive today, not only do they, for most people, I'm of course excluding a racist minority, they condemn these crimes of the past, but they also were not themselves involved, and they were not passive observers in this because they weren't even born. So in essence, they have no blame in this, and this is an aspect in some culture that in some black communities, not all, where there is still a a blame put on these people that have had no part at all in this, even descendants of people who were descendant whose ancestors did not own slaves. Um, this, I think, this has gone too far. People, for example, there are people calling for reparations for this. I mean, how far back in history do you have to go to get all the different war crimes and then pay people back today? And then, 1,000 years from now, people will have forgotten that these reparations were paid, and then the whole cycle starts over again with people asking for reparations. This is just too much. Let's not do it. Let's not do these reparations, because, number one, people today weren't involved in these crimes and therefore bear no responsibility for those actions. Okay, I went off on a tangent there, but let's get back on track. How black, queer, and trans folk bear a unique burden from a heteropatriarchal society that disposes of us like garbage and simultaneously fetishizes us and profits off of us. And that is state violence. Okay? Now, I am 100% sure, well, okay, not 100% sure, but I am sure that the government at its publicly elected levels, I can't speak for the bureaucracy, but that there is no fetishization of black, queers, and trans folks that is sponsored by the government in an official capacity, in the sense that the U.S. Congress does not say, let's make gay porn, or let's make trans porn. That is not something that the U.S. Congress says. That is not something that the U.S. President says, who, by the way, is a black man at the time of the making of this video. Of course, judging by the way the election is going now, the next president will not be a black man. Not that that is a bad thing, because I personally say that it should be meritocracy. We need to find the person who is the wisest, the person who has the best policies, the person who has the best strength of moral character to be the leader. And, of course, I'm not entirely satisfied in the way things are going, but I guess I'll have to live with it. And so back on this, how black, queer, and trans folk bear a unique burden from a heteropatriarchal society. Oh, the patriarchy! Finally, we have reached a question that talks about heteronormativity and the patriarchy. Yes, this patriarchy that we have in this Western society where most people have equal rights. I'm just out of breath now because of how much I've stressed the word patriarchy. The patriarchy, in Western society at least, is not state violence. The state does not sponsor the patriarchy. Let's be clear on that. If there is any patriarchy, it is a social-cultural thing. The state is not sponsoring this. And heteronormativity, I'll be honest, I don't have a problem with heteronormativity. I don't think it's a bad thing. In fact, I myself am a bit heteronormative. However, I am not totalitarian or authoritarian in this. I say, if you want to have something that I consider sexually deviant, as long as I am not involved in it, I won't stop you. You can do it as long as you're not involving me or or, well, my children. I don't want my children to be involved in that. That's not something I want. And that is and judging by my worldview, it is only logical as a parent that I would believe this. Of course, I, in fact, am not a parent. This is just talking hypothetically. But, oh no, I'm a bit heteronormative, but I'm not actually totalitarian about it. Ooh, such a big villain that I'm not actually calling for any laws against people having their trans, queer sex or anything, because I think what you do in your bedroom is your own business. Just stay out of my business, and I'll stay out of your business. In fact, stay out of my business, and I'll stay out of your business. If you get in my business, I'll still try my best to stay out of your business, but if you get in my business, you're going to get the business end of my business, which means the full force of the law. In fact, I'm what I'm basically saying here is don't rape me. Don't rape me. Something that no one should do in any situation. Don't rape anyone. I'll be honest, rape is a bad thing. Don't rape. Okay, next one, going back to the right side on this. Not politically right, because this is... Well, the right-left dichotomy is something that is a bit weird, and depending on which country you're in, it's different. In the US, this would be considered left. Okay. How 5,000 black people in the US are undocumented, oh, I'm going a bit Al Sharpton here, immigrants, and relegated to the shadows. Undocumented immigrants. This means that these people came to the United States from another country, which means these people are most likely not in the same sense. I'm black. Stumbling over my words. In the same sense, African Americans as the average black man in the U.S. would be, in the sense that these people are not descendants of slaves who were brought to the North America from the 1600s through the 1800s. No, these people are people that came from Africa or other places where there are blacks. Or perhaps Mexican blacks. There are black Hispanics. That can also be something. Or other places in Latin America. Because I know that illegal immigration from Mexico itself isn't as high as it is from other places, for example, in Central America, in which relatives I have there have told me that, in fact, this illegal immigration is incentivized. It is incentivized, which bothers me to no end, that there are people incentivizing this, even though places like Guatemala are economically fine. And I mean, fix your own country. Don't run away. You're not under some sort of terrorist attack like they are in Syria. So, okay. I'll be honest. I think that laws should be respected, and if you are breaking a law, by definition, you are a criminal. This is not an opinion, this is a linguistically accurate fact that someone who breaks laws is a criminal, a lawbreaker. And the thing is, blacks illegally immigrating into the US, I don't distinguish between that and other people of other ethnicities or skin colors illegally immigrating into the US. I think that you should at least go by the proper routes, and if the proper routes are too hard, that people in the US should call for law reform. And what also bothers me is the fact that this is even happening. What is wrong with our borders? We have laws that are supposed to prevent this. Why don't we enforce them? So, relegated to the shadows, I'll be honest, they should be deported, or at least punished in some manner for the way they entered the US. I do have a method that could be effective in turning all this into economic success. However, I'm not going to talk about that for the moment. Next one, how black girls are used as negotiation chips during times of conflict and war. This does not happen in the United States of America. That is something that is for sure. This does not happen in the United States of America. Even internationally, I believe that this is something that is pretty rare, unless you consider Boko Haram a something, a national unit that can be considered a national unit in times of conflict and war. In this case, however, it is the blacks doing this to other blacks, which I don't think Black Lives Matter is something that is fully assessing this in that sense. Okay. And next one, how black folks living with disabilities and different abilities, as opposed to disabilities, as in special talents or something. I have no idea what they're talking about. What is... If they already mentioned disabilities, now we're talking about different abilities. Bear the burden of state-sponsored Darwinian experiments that attempt to squeeze us into boxes of normality defined by white supremacy, and that is state violence. I'll tell you something now. In the U.S. government, at least the U.S. Congress, there is no white supremacist majority. That is not true. If you look at all the people individually, you will find that that is not true. It is an exaggeration. Are there white supremacists on the U.S. Congress? Maybe, but that is something that is generally considered not very electable, even among whites. White society in the U.S. at large dislikes white supremacists. But Darwinian experiments. This reminds me of back in the 20s and 30s when the U.S. was working with eugenics and stuff, where they were sterilizing people. But this could also be talking about the experiments that have been done in this racist manner during the time of the segregation, and where blacks were infected with diseases and were not treated for these diseases. Now, this is something that actually I can agree with in some sense, that this is something that is wrong. You shouldn't be taking advantage of disabled people to take your Darwinian experiments. That is something that I agree with. You should not be doing with any race, for that matter. Or with children, because I know that sometimes when the DCF, Department of Children and Families, takes away a child, this has happened in Massachusetts, of course, where a girl was taken away from her parents, and children like that, these people are sometimes reserved for government experimentation on children, in a sense, which bothers me a little bit, because they then try these medications that are experimental, and these don't work. I think there should be a law saying that if a child is taken away by the government, that the government can't just do anything they want with a child. I think that's taking it way too far. Of course, this is a state-based thing that has occurred. This is not a national government issue. Okay, that was a sort of long rant. Wow, over 25 minutes. Wow. Let me get to the... the final segment here on this page. Number symbol. Black Lives Matter is working on a world where black lives are no longer systematically and internationally targeted for demise. Okay. We affirm our contributions to this society, our humanity, and our resilience in the face of deadly oppression. We have put our sweat, equity, and love for black people into creating a political project, taking the hashtag, I've had to say the word now, of social media and into the streets. The call for Black Lives to Matter is a rallying cry for all blacks. A rallying cry for all black lives striving for liberation. Okay. Interesting. So, number symbol Black Lives Matter is working for a world where black lives are no longer systematically and internationally targeted for demise. I do not believe that black lives are internationally targeted for demise. In fact, Africa is a major target for people wanting to develop Africa, people saying that Africa is a major place that has a lot of economic potential that is not being fully tapped, and that it can become an economic giant if only we get through some government corruption and we get to organizing Africa. I mean, China is buying lots of land in Africa for this purpose. People constantly send food and other sorts of aid to Africa, and in order to preserve black lives in Africa. This is something that I have to stress, that in Western society, it is considered a good and moral thing to send money and goods to preserve the lives of blacks in Africa. So I don't believe that blacks are internationally targeted for demise. I also don't believe that whites are internationally targeted for demise equally. Getting at those people say, oh, white genocide, and I say, not really. But systematically, again, the only example I can really think of is Planned Parenthood and other government-funded abortion clinics that are founded by individuals who obviously disliked blacks and who targeted blacks for this. But other than that, I have to say that the U.S. government, at least in its top levels, is not systematically and intentionally targeting blacks for demise. Oh, intentionally. I just went on an international level, but I think that adds to prove the point that I was making. We affirm our contributions to this society. Good. There are black contributions to the society of the United States of America. That is true, and some of them are actually pretty significant. For example, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Said some very good things, and he was also in favor of people carrying firearms, just like Gandhi was. And people opposed to that were some big names. Let me drop them out there. Hitler, Stalin, Mao. Okay, getting off on a tangent there. Just setting a dichotomy on these things. Okay. Our humanity, I think we've established that in the previous video. In the previous video that this video is a sequel to, of course, is a previous video to this one, is on a different subject. And our resilience in the face of deadly oppression. Deadly oppression, more blacks kill blacks than white policemen kill blacks. More... These abortions that happen at the abortion clinics, almost all of them are voluntary. So in the sense that this deadly oppression is, I can't really see it as some others, unless it's some sort of self-oppression, which this is saying it is not, of course. We have put our sweat, equity, and love for black people into creating a political project, taking the hashtag off of social media and into the streets. Now, I would be saying, sure, that's a good thing. I also have black people that I hold highly, that I hold in high esteem, in fact. And I'll be honest, I'm not the guy that goes for social media, okay? But if you want to do social media, good for you. If you want to take it into the streets, good for you, as long as you're not breaking any laws in doing so. And but this goes further, saying the call for Black Lives to Matter is a rallying cry for all Black lives striving for liberation. Okay, okay. So let me get to some final comments then. Okay, final comments on Do Black Lives Matter? The Black Lives Matter movement itself is using a lot of rhetoric that is based on things that are either false or simply exaggerations of facts or contrivances or misconstruences of actual facts. I believe that the movement is a bit on the racist side, let's be honest. And I think that it does not actually address the real issues that are causing all the issues. I mean, the real causes of the issues in the black community. It jumps around and it accuses the U.S. government of being the architects of the supposed oppression of blacks, asking for blacks to rise up for liberation, but they don't. I don't really see how that is actually occurring based on the things I know. And if you disagree with me, then please do say so in the comments below. If you agree with me and you have some extra things to add to the conversation, also please write in the comments below. If you'd like to share this video with friends, please do so. If you'd like to subscribe to my channel, feel free to. I always like to subscribe. I always like people to subscribe to me. If you like the video, go ahead. If you dislike the video, go ahead. It is your opinion, and I'll be honest, sure, go ahead and have an opinion. Please spout off in the comments. And if you have any suggestions for future videos and future questions you want me to address, please do so. And just one final reminder, I do not own the images, besides the ones I made, that are used in this video, and these are things that Black Lives Matter has put on blacklivesmatter.com/about. These are things that they want people to know. I wouldn't understand why they would criticize my fair use of them. Besides for the fact that they don't like me criticizing their movement. So I do say, long live blacks and long live people of all ethnicities. Because we all descend from the same ancestors, whether you look at the writings of Charles Darwin or the prophet Moses. So I'll see you all next time.